Making the jump and doing that first all-important DJ gig is going to be a very nerve-wracking experience, but don't forget, everyone from Carl Cox to David Guetta had to, at one stage, do their very first gig, and I'm sure they were just as nervous as you'd be. Hello, what's up YouTube, and welcome to this episode of Road to Professional DJ, where we are talking all about how do you know when you're ready for your first DJ gig. That is a question I have been asked a few times before, and I remember being in that position myself, having the exact same question. But just before we go any further than that, if you are a DJ, whether you're a beginner or you're advanced or you're trying to boost your DJ career, this is the YouTube channel for you. So make sure you do hit the subscribe button for more unbelievable content which will hopefully boost your DJ career coming soon. Back to the matter at hand though, how do you know when you're ready for your first DJ gig? Well, I've tried my best to break down a few of the different steps which are going to help you tick off the checklist that you are now at a competent level that you can do your first DJ gig. To start with, I thought, what are the very basics? Where do you need to begin? Well, you have to be able to use the equipment. You have to know your way around a mixer. You have to, of course, know the very basics premises of mixing. So to start with, the DJ equipment, well, this is going to depend because there is a huge variety of DJ equipment out there, and it's going to really depend as to what you will be using on your first gig as to what the setting is. You could, for example, be in a pub, bring in your own controller. Well, perfect. If you're bringing your own controller, then you can just make sure that you're fully competent on your own gear and you'll be up and running and ready to play that first gig. But you could be a bit like me, be a little bit on a budget and be daunting or be faced with a setup a bit like this, or actually this is a little bit of a more budget club setup. For a long time ago I was using a setup a bit more like this, and that was even not even my first one myself as well. So what do you have to do? Well, you have to make sure that you can use a decent amount of controllers, or at least know your head or know your way around some controllers, because that's going to be the very bottom line of what you could be playing in. If you're going to go to a club and it's maybe a local DJ or a local event promotion company working, there could be a more basic controller like that. If you're going to a big nightclub, there could be something a bit more like this or even more stepped up. So what do I suggest? Well, get yourself up to speed on a more basic controller to start with, because the premise on that is the exact same, whether it's a £100 controller, whether it's a £1,700 setup, or whether it's a £5,000 setup in a nightclub. The premise is the same. Get yourself up to speed on some controllers. If you think you're only going to be into DJing for a little while or it's something new, get yourself something cheap. If you're then super serious, upscale. What can you also do to have a bit of practice on these if you haven't got them? Well, I actually hired an Allen Heath Zone mixer, I'll put a picture of this up now, for a gig that I was doing in November last year. The artist we booked, Jasper James, wanted to use that mixer and I'd never used it before, so I hired one for a week. You can also take a trip down to the DJ shop. I went down to my local one in Southampton. I told them that I had a gig coming up. This is when I was using more of the basic tractor and they was using CDJs. I said, look, I actually rang them up and said, look, I need to get my head around some more high quality mixing equipment for a gig I've got coming up. I've never used CDJs before. Can I come down? I'll pay you and just have a jam on your setup for an hour or two. I said, don't worry about paying us, just come down for a bit and have a go on them. So brilliant, I managed to have a go on the exact same decks that I was going to be using live in the club, so it took out one of the complete worries out of the way, and I was ready to hit the ground running as soon as I got behind those decks live in that club in front of an audience of people. So step number one, get your head around the equipment. You don't have to be an absolute expert, but just make sure you know the basics. In fact, another thing I've just realized with that, you can watch so many YouTube tutorials on virtually any decks out there. So you can watch someone going through all the basic functions of the setup for that equipment, and you'll be able to get your head around all the functions, the different formats, the settings, the special effects, you name it, you'll be able to get your head around it. Mixing, of course, the premise of being a DJ. Mixing one tune to another smoothly, efficiently, or in an exciting way is, of course, the very premise of being a DJ. So, you need to get yourself up to a decent standard of mixing. Depending, again, of course, what the setup's going to be. If you're in a pub, people really aren't going to be as arsed about the mixing as you may think. And also, you're not in a particularly serious setup. The sound systems maybe even not that good. Whereas if you're in a club in front of a bunch of people, you could be under more pressure from a club manager. And you could then also be under such a loud sound system that a bad mix is going to sound really awful. So, get your head around mixing. If you've got like a 1 hour long slot, you could prepare your set for an hour, but you've got to be quite careful doing that, because if the crowd are not feeling the vibe, then you maybe have to have a few songs or a few different selections up your sleeve so that you can work off the vibe given by the crowd and play the songs that are right for that moment. But I used to rehearse my sets before playing. It worked well for me. Maybe I got lucky, or maybe I just planned it so well for my clientele that I could follow my sets and the crowd had an awesome time. But be careful if you're doing that, especially if you are somewhere which could have a more varied crowd, such as a pub. If you're going to a deep house rave, then you could prepare a 1 hour long deep house mix, and you'll probably get away with that a little bit more. Song selection, or at least a full collection of songs that you can choose from, is very, very important from a DJ. As I just alluded to, preparing a set maybe won't work perfectly, so you need to have a library with you so that you can mix it up if needed to. So you can maybe call on some old school bangers, something more current, something more crowd pleasing, or maybe something a little bit niche. Having a plethora of music that you can call upon is going to really help you when you're in some sticky situations, or even if you get a request from someone which is a bit obscure. If you can have a decent song selection, that will bode very well for the future of that gig or that DJ slot you have. What I would say though is, again, plan for where you're going to be playing. If you're at a pub, you're going to have some more crowd pleasers. If you're doing a wedding, you're going to have a wedding playlist. If you're playing an underground nightclub, then you're going to need a decent selection of underground music. But don't worry, you do not need thousands of songs, okay? You don't need thousands of songs. If someone comes up to you, asks for a request, and you haven't got the song, well, you haven't got the song. It's not the end of the world, alright? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about spending thousands of pounds on music before your first gig. It's just not necessary. Finally, you just need a bit of confidence. Go out there, give it your best shot, and just see what happens. Ultimately, everyone's got to go for their first gig at some point, so just go out there, stick your head up high, and go for it. If you make a mistake, well, who gives a monkeys? You're gonna make mistakes. Like, if you're too worried about making a mistake, I've got news for you. You're gonna make a mistake. I've made mistakes. Every single DJ who's made it, or who is a professional, who is a semi-pro, or has just done a few gigs, has made a mistake. I guarantee that. So don't worry too much about making a mistake. You're only human after all, and you know what? So often the crowd doesn't even notice. I've come off from a set before and they said, "Oh, how do you think it went?" And I've been a bit down and they said, "Oh, you know what? I think I made a few mistakes. I wasn't very happy. It could have gone better here, there." And they've been like, "What? I thought your set was awesome." Alright, maybe they're my friends, so they're gonna say that. But the point is, besides the point is the fact that there's going to be so many times you're going to make mistakes out there. If you have any sort of length at this DJ career, just don't worry about it. The worst thing you can do is spend years and years and years practicing in your bedroom, never actually getting out there and doing that first gig, which would have given you the confidence to do a next one, and you could have missed out on your DJ career. Your hobby could have faded away, and maybe you'll look back when you're older and you would never have given it a shot, and that'd be something you would really, really regret. So don't spend too long worrying about whether or not you're ready for this first gig or not. If you're playing at a club and there's 5 or 6 sets throughout the night, offer to go first. There's not going to be anyone in the club, or maybe a few people arriving, and then it means it's a nice warm-up. You get to play in a live sound system, you get to get a feel for the environment, and it'll give you a bit of confidence. If of course you're ready for a wedding or something and you're going to charge, just start charging cheap. You know, if it goes wrong, you can say, look, it was a cheap booking. You know, you don't have to worry about absolute going to the nth degree making sure you're the world's best DJ before you do any gig, because it is just not necessary. The best way you can get experience is from actually getting out there, getting behind the decks and playing in front of some people, because there's no substitute for actually doing the real thing and getting yourself out there. So, to tie it off, I really hope that's given you a nice rounded update as to what level you do kind of need to be at before you play a gig. But ultimately, you've just got to make the jump and do the gig, because every single DJ's been there. Give it a crack. What is really the worst thing that's going to happen? So, that just about ties it off. Please do give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it or found it useful or found it of any value. And of course, do subscribe for more good stuff coming soon. Cheers!